Hey guys, so I'm back with another podcast. Today I want to talk about the subject of prostitution and resilience. I've been reading a lot of literature on the sex trade, and what I find is we are all talking about the same phenomenon. We are all talking about the same reality. The many pro-prostitution studies I've read so far completely acknowledge the prevalence of disrespect and violence, and even that most of it is committed by Johns. But some of the language will differ, and the takeaway at the end of the day will also differ. I'll say this industry is unreformable, while they say it is reformable, essentially. Only that most of these reforms do not focus on the Johns, but it is the women and others in the trade who have to learn resilience, toughen up, get smarter, get wiser. I'm going to focus on that take today because I think it's a very, very dangerous narrative. I actually want to start with an illustration, and the person whose short piece I'm going to read was in the trade. She was in prostitution briefly, in stripping and porn as well. So this person wrote a whole advice guide for women in the sex trade. And this is one subsection, which is advice. What to do when a client makes you feel like crap. Sex work is a customer service to the max, and some days it sucks. Getting stiffed or stood up, getting ogled or groped or ignored, enduring shitty comments, cluelessness, mind games, bad breath, funky toenails. As sex professionals, no matter what, we're expected to look good and smile even while we're dying inside. If you would have switched out sex work for prostitution, customer for John, or sex buyer, sex professional for person in prostitution, this could have been said by a survivor. I'll continue. Given that our work is centered in our sexual selves, it often feels easier to just ignore bad feelings or hope they go away. But few of us truly have the ability to shake off negative encounters like they never happened. Instead, hurt and insult fester, poisoning our self-esteem, rattling our minds while shutting our bodies down. Dr. Robert M. Sapolsky, a neurologist who studies the neurobiology of stress, wrote in his essay, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, social stressors suppress our immune systems, leading to indigestion, insomnia, addiction, eating disorders, eczemas, migraines, and so much more. That list that she just said relates to prostitution is a significant part of what I said some of the significant health risks of prostitution are. There are others that are unique to the trade, like pregnancy, regular fear of rape by the customer, STDs. It's the physical and the emotional stress of prostitution that leads to indigestion. Indigestion can happen from emotional stress alone, but it also can be a result of, literally unwanted penetration, especially anal. I know this is very uncomfortable for people to hear. We like to pretend it doesn't exist, but prostitution is the only job where penetration happens as the job. And this can be really bad for your environment of your digestive system. Insomnia, again, can be emotional distress, but it also has to do with a fucked up day-night rhythm that a lot of women have in brothels or strip clubs. Although these places are often open during the day, the night shift can really screw with you. Addiction, obviously, is a facilitator to dissociation, eating disorders. Your body is the focus of the job in a way that's even more extreme than any other industry because it's literally your completely naked body to your genitalia, everything. And the people judging you are also going to be the ones touching and penetrating you. We know it's bad enough to be like an Instagram model doing lingerie. That can be bad enough for your mental health, but now imagine the people writing the comments saying hot babe or you're too fat or whatever, they all got to touch you, right? Eczema is a very common response to, if you experience being touched over and over by someone you don't want, a lot of people respond with a neurological type of skin rashes and diseases. The point being, it is not the behavior of the woman herself most of the time that is causing her health issues. It is the environment she's in that's conducive to bad health. This piece of writing will make it out to be that her health is in her hands and that there is nothing inherent about prostitution that will lead her to have these outcomes. There are many parameters of the sex trade that are not in the individual woman's power to shift. This includes the kind of sexual practices that are currently en vogue, that are in demand, that the average woman will probably have to cater to some degree to make ends meet, such as anal sex, or the current price range, which has to do with market forces, which will decide whether she has to see that kind of dodgy sounding man today or not. Okay, but I'll continue with the text. Left unaddressed, these accumulated grievances and ailments lead directly to burnout. So when the crap day comes, recognize it for what it can be, a gift in disguise, a prime opportunity to be good to yourself, so let's get down to it. And I've seen this a bunch of times. I think it was Chelsea Geddes, who's a prostitution survivor from New Zealand, who said that she was handed a pamphlet from, I think, the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective probably, talking about sex worker burnout. The problem is, like I'm trying to outline here, the symptoms of that burnout are also symptoms of PTSD. How do I know if it's just burnout and I'm just exhausted and I've been doing too many dates? That's what it's called, meeting a John on a date. Or this is actually traumatizing for me because it's unwanted sexual contact that is experienced by many people. I'm not even saying all, but many people, akin to abuse and rape. It's hard to distinguish those. And it's very, very dangerous to tell someone who's actually developing PTSD like Chelsea was, because it puts the responsibility on her, which is what this article continues to do. It says, how can you change? How can you better manage your day-to-day sex work? If you just, structure your time better, etc., then this burnout won't happen to you. And if it still happens, honey, maybe it's kind of your fault. I'm not accusing the author of this article of victim blaming, but I think it's clear how it lends itself to victim blaming. And women like Chelsea, and there are many like her who come out and say prostitution traumatized me, they get this narrative. Well, did you take care of yourself? Did you? And a lot of these women entered the sex trade as minors, but aside from that, people are just like, well, right, did you do these techniques? So let's hear what these techniques are. First, the text says, take care of your body. When we're humiliated, that hurt has to move through our bodies somatically. Oof. I mean, yes, but why are we calling something work where it's quite normal that men sexually humiliate women? The text continues, very few of us learn this as children. Instead, we're taught to rely on our intellect to process bad emotions. But our minds can't move what's stored in our muscles and joints and voice boxes and bones. I mean, this is all completely correct. I agree. But again, what's the difference between a bad date and a traumatic one? Maybe he didn't punch her. He didn't push her down, hold her down. Like she said in the beginning, she did not talk about being assaulted. She talked about, let's go back. She talked about getting ogled and groped. I mean, I think groping is assault, but that is pretty serious. But it's not violence with a capital V. Shitty comments, mind games, bad breath, funky toenails. I think all these things are serious, but we're not even talking about violence. And still, this level of having to be sexually intimate with a man who's making you uncomfortable and who you think is gross. You're not scared for your life. It's not even that. And she used the words dying inside. And she's talking about having to move she doesn't call it trauma, but something of the kind out of your body, the bad energy. Okay, so what's the advice? First one is get right in the shower, wash the day away. It is very, 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 very common for women in prostitution to do a lot of skin scrubbing, using disinfectant, showering, trying to wash the man away. So his smell, his bodily fluids, etc., the memory, and continuing even after they're completely clean, sometimes rubbing themselves raw. That's the experience of many, 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 many women who view themselves as prostitution survivors. It is also the experience of many, 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 many women who call themselves sex workers. It is the same reality, but different conclusions drawn. Next advice. Eat moderately and mindfully, but only if you're hungry. Don't starve yourself as punishment or stuff yourself in an attempt to dull the pain. The problem is that, someone really traumatized with it might not even feel their hunger. That's the thing that a lot of prostitution survivors have said. Huschke Mau, who, if you speak German, you should all read her book, and if you speak English, you should email her publisher and ask for an English translation. I'll put the links down below. Who said that she actually lost the ability to tell if she was hungry. Dissociation can be so extreme that you really forget to eat. She writes in her autobiography and political manifesto about her female pimp, the madam, bringing a cat into the brothel who she adopted, who essentially saved her life. And this cat obviously, needed to sleep, eat. And that's how she relearned how to listen to her own body. Oh, right, I am hungry. I am alive. I am hungry. I feel the hunger. I will respond to it. The dissociation in prostitution can be so extreme that you unlearn basic needs like hunger, thirst, need for sleep, needing to go to the bathroom, pain. Everything can be incredibly dulled. But yeah, the advice is to eat moderately and mindfully, which is really hard enough for people outside the sex trade, especially women, many of who have an unhealthy relationship to food, which is not their own fault. I mean, this person's not saying if you have an eating disorder, just stop having an eating disorder. But a lot of women in the sex trade do have really serious problems with food for a variety of reasons that are not their fault. And this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's not going to work for them. I know one woman's testimony who I read, she was a so-called sugar baby, so someone who was in prostitution for one man rather than many. One of the reasons she stayed for a long time was because she was able to access healthy food. I know that especially in America, the food quality is horrific, and the fact that a lot of Americans are overweight or otherwise not eating healthy is because organic food, good quality food, is hard to access in the first place. Right? You have really bad regulations in your food industry, etc. Growing up poor, you're going to have access to pretty shitty food, which is going to harm your entire body and your mind in a variety of ways. And her being with this very powerful, dangerous, abusive man allowed her to at least eat. So she talked about how she was doing kind of the things that have come up or will come up in this list. She was eating well. And that's one of the reasons she stayed long. She's but if I can nourish my body well, then I can handle this. And it still really, really, really damaged her. The John, not some mysterious cloud of smoke. The man traumatized her still. She was eating well. She was in beautiful places. She got to travel, and it still damaged her. These are not some kind of great wall to trauma, physical, emotional. Okay, next advice. Unless the gym is your happiest place on earth, don't force yourself through your regular routine. That's like piling in extra homework when you're already failing class. You'll either spend the time zoning out or counting the seconds until your workout is over. Neither is good. The best self-care is to be fully present, addressing your feelings directly. Okay, so this is a little bit of the middle class part coming through, because a lot of the women who are in survival mode, which are the ones who might identify with the burnout label, a workout routine is probably not part of their life, if it ever was. You need to have the time and the space and the know-how to have a workout routine and have the energy. A lot of women, when they're, stuck in prostitution, they got other things to worry about than a workout routine. When it comes to workouts, we also have the problem that staying in shape is also a chore that she does to appeal to Johns, as is all kinds of other body treatments, the skin, the nails, the hair. Rather than it being about her feeling good about herself, it can be necessary for survival. That said, a lot of women have talked about how sports and physical activity or dance reconnect them to their body. And again, for women whose lives have regular routines, this is sound advice for when you're stressed. There's just these dubious parts in this text that make it unclear if that's truly the audience, or if we're not overlapping stress with something worse. Another piece of advice: scream into a pillow, kick a punching bag, take long walk or bike ride. Play loud music, dance like you don't care, sing at the top of your lungs, move hard and fast and long enough so that you're breathing hard. Wear yourself out with it. I think this is all good advice for someone who's emotionally stressed out. But someone who's in a traumatizing environment, this is not nearly enough. And of course, it's all on her. And long walks and bike rides, not really accessible to the many, many, many women who, in my country, don't speak German, don't speak English, or migrant women are socially isolated in a foreign country, don't know their rights, oftentimes can't even leave the fucking brothel. Next advice is, while moving, say what you're feeling out loud. Scared, 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 scared. Oh fuck, so we are talking about men who are scary. We're not just talking about men who are unpleasant. And she has to suppress all those feelings in the moment while she's with him. Like, you cannot show fear. The sadists want you to show fear, and they'll respond, with glee if you show it. Huschke Mau, in her autobiography, one of the first things she writes in the book is John drove her into the forest, into his weird remote hut where he had a bunch of weapons that he showed her explicitly, and she made jokes and laughed, even though in her mind she was thinking, I'm not going to get out of here alive. She did, thankfully, but she had to suppress her fear. And yeah, it takes a lot more than going out into the woods and shouting scared, scared, scared to release that trauma. A lot of the women who live that, who are scared for their life with a John, which is not rare at all, they are never going to fully recover. I don't want anyone to feel pessimistic, therapy isn't worth it, getting out isn't worth it. Your life can get a lot better. It definitely can. And I'm not analyzing any individual saying you are never getting rid of your trauma. I'm just saying there's a lot of women who've tried for decades and there's still significant remnants. It's still part of their life. You find new hope. You find new things. You can reinvent yourself if you hopefully have some degree of support. But there is a degree of irreversible harm, which does not mean women are weak. This is about how horrific it is that your survival depends on meeting men that you are worried might seriously harm or kill you. And then you have to touch them and get intimate with them and call them honey. The text continues, ouch, ouch, ouch. So this is also about, women being in pain and not being able to tell the John, because again, a sadist will react with glee and probably hurt her more. And a non-sadist will be uncomfortable, and then maybe he won't come, and then he'll want the money back, or he'll continue for even longer because, he couldn't finish, but he really wants to because he paid, and so many reasons. It's insane. If this was somebody talking about their relationship, I go into the woods and say ouch and scared, because that's how my boyfriend makes me feel, we'd all be like, he's an abuser. But Johns are not abusers, they're just bad clients. Bad clients. The text continues, pissed, 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 pissed. Women are angry all the time at John's, and they cannot express that no matter what. You have to smile. You have to be friendly. You have to totally deny how you feel. You have to be this perfect, submissive, happy servant. That anger stays with women for a long time. And it drives a lot of them into activism, but of course I'd rather they could live in fucking peace. But these men, 99.9% are out there running around comparatively fine. Though I don't actually think it's good for men to be having sex with women who are scared and pain and angry at them. I think the men have to dissociate to some degree also from the woman's humanity. But this is a topic for another day. The text continues, this lets you feel your emotions in your body, throat, and mind, allowing that energy to move through you. I actually disagree. This is the part where I'm she's not just talking about stress or a bad day. These sentiments actually sound pretty traumatizing. And anyone who tells you you can breathe out the fear and the pain and the anger, no. I mean, I'm not a trained psychotherapist, but I will say with a lot of confidence that is not gonna make you okay in the long run. It'll be cathartic. I'm not saying this couldn't be part of therapy. But part of therapy is also good therapy is somebody telling you, let's try and find a strategy out of the thing that's traumatizing you. Be it the work environment or a relationship. Can we try and remove you? Otherwise, you'll just get traumatized over and over and over. And you'll be stuck in the cycle, always coming back. I also know that there are women who are in prostitution and getting therapy who say, I just don't make any progress. And I stay in prostitution so I can afford the therapy, but I just can't make any progress on my therapy because I just keep having to go back into this scary, painful, awful, traumatizing situation. You can only start healing once you're out, and I have another video on why getting out's very, very hard. Okay, last advice is call a buddy if you can. Get yourself some sympathy by all means. For some perspective, it can help to ask the question, am I going to still be mad about this a year from now? Okay, so I agree, friends is good, though I mean, social isolation is unfortunately a reality for many women in the sex trade for a variety of reasons, not just stigma. Am I still going to be mad about this a year from now? That's like belittling your own experience almost. It risks being like that. If you had a fight with someone that was over some nonsense and you should probably forget about it and like you're going to be okay, then you can ask yourself, am I still going to be mad in a year from now? If a man put his penis in you and it fucking hurt, yeah, there's a significant chance you'll still think about that a year from now. That's a traumatic experience. Often, like having to suppress and not being able to say that because loss of income or increased harm, and it's probably not a one-time thing. Yeah, that advice is a bit odd. Okay, the text continues. This next step isn't easy, but it's part of the work we all need to do to make this world the place we want to live in. You know that moment of true inspiration. We hear someone righteous speak or read about an act of breathtaking kindness, that feeling that swells up in your chest, that poignant blend of awe and tenderness and gratitude when we think, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. Here's your chance. What? Women in prostitution have to suppress their trauma to make the world a better place? Where is that text going? I'm really irritated now. It continues. I know it's not fair. Okay, well, we agree. Why do we have to be the ones to turn the other cheek when we're depleted and aggravated and insulted? But as the Buddha said, you will not be punished for your anger, but by your anger. When we fight fire with fire, the whole world turns to ash. Instead, we fight fire with water. Now women in the sex trade have to be like Buddha. Someone called you an ugly cunt, berated your body, touched you, stuck his finger up you, even though you said you don't want that, and you have to be calm about it. I actually disagree. Like, I think anger can be healing. Anger is often a step that women take or that they arrive at that helps them leave abusive relationships, and prostitution is an abusive relationship for many, many, many women. Anger actually makes you return to yourself, or it has that potential. I actually felt mistreated. This was not fair. I did not deserve this. I'm not in the school of just make your anger, let it fly away. Anger can be irrational, but certainly is not in this situation. You have every right to be angry. Listen to that anger. That anger is your self-respect. Waking up, saying, I don't want to be treated like this. This is not right, and this is not on me. And this text says, it might not be fair, but that voice, you have to suppress it. To keep doing the sex work, suppress your real feelings. And people will be like, oh, but like I have to suppress my anger when my boss is rude. But again, we're talking about situations that she is saying included things like sexual assault and groping and painful penetration and whatnot. That's not like your boss shouting at you. And women in prostitution get the boss shouting at them on top of the sexual trauma. The text continues. That client who stood you up, maybe they were in the middle of a shit day far worse than anything you can imagine. Maybe they just lost their job or their grandmother or their dog. Send them a blast of unconditional love. Men stand up women in prostitution because they think they're replaceable and they're not people and they don't deserve respect. That's why they stand them up. It doesn't feel good to acknowledge that, but it's probably not that their grandma died. Fucking hell. The text continues. That handsy fan with no manners, right? So the sexual harasser, the groper, which is criminal, by the way. See them for what they are, someone lost in their neediness, stunted by desire, and what feels out of reach. Bullshit, they're a misogynist. Bullshit. That stupid mouthy sub, muster what compassion you can manage. People with happy lives don't act like fucktards. I don't fucking care if the Johns are unhappy. This is not okay. It's literally inexcusable. Picture your tormentor's face in front of you and breathe into a simple prayer of forgiveness and acceptance. Forgive your harasser. Someone who, this article doesn't say, but maybe you actually experienced as your rapist. Forgive them and accept them, because their life might have been tough. This woman, I don't know if she called herself a feminist, but she used really, really woke language to describe herself. If you read her bio, it's mega woke. And she's telling women who are scared, hurt, and angered by men that man who hurt her, she should feel sorry because she doesn't know what's going on with him. Well, yeah, I have encountered this narrative before Johns use it. They use it in court when they have killed women in prostitution. So men have stood up in German court and talked about how hard their lives are, how their girlfriend left them, how they got a divorce, how their grandma is sick, I'm not exaggerating, how they're going to be deported from Germany, right, asylum seekers, and they just had to let that anger out. Those men were also releasing the anger from their bodies by robbing, raping, and killing women in prostitution. Like, what the fuck is that paragraph? Maybe he had a shit day. Women in prostitution have shit days. And a lot of them don't attack anybody. Instead, they attack themselves. Which is unfair and fucking wrong. And like, okay, now I'm getting angry reading this. Like, I don't care that this is a woman who experienced prostitution and I'm someone who hasn't. Treating women in prostitution like any other woman also means that we get to disagree with them and call them out when they're talking bullshit. And I call bullshit on this line. I don't care what happened to him. I don't care if he is a sexual abuse survivor. It doesn't excuse anything. Like, if a woman says this about her personal experience, I personally cope doing this and this and this. Not gonna judge her. Might personally say, like, not sure if that's actually gonna work for you. Like, if she asks my opinion, I'd not lie. Doesn't sound like good coping. Doesn't sound healthy. Sounds incredibly self-denying, but if that's what she's doing in her situation, that's one thing. But this isn't an advice for sex workers guide. Jesus Christ. There is actually an almost pathological level of compassion that a lot of women have for their abusers. That can be in prostitution, a woman towards her Johns, or a woman in an abusive relationship, so a woman towards her boyfriend, husband, whatever. Where women tell themselves, he can't help it. He had a bad childhood. He was abused. He has broken relationships to his parental figure. He has been hurt by other women. That's why he just, can't trust me and gets super jealous. All those things. Women stay in abusive situations because they think if I leave, like, he'll kill himself. If I am not in prostitution, who will heal all these broken men? It's like, it's a prime manipulation tactic for men to share traumatic events in their life, real or fake, to in some cases create a trauma bond and to then sort of yield them, sometimes actively or passively, knowing it's in the back of her mind, right? So when he says, oh, I overreacted, well, this or that thing happened and I'm not over it, so I just can't help myself. Men can never help themselves, but women must be saints. And women try to be saints, and women break themselves being saints in these kinds of situations. Really understand the urge of a woman in prostitution to see herself as a healer of broken men. Because if being in prostitution is actually pointless in the sense that it doesn't, contribute anything to society, all it does, it's, in that moment, very immediate physical relief for him that he could have done by himself with his hand, and huge damage to her, then there's this feeling of, what's the fucking point, right? It's hard to not become very nihilistic and depressed and disillusioned and just very dark and sad. So I understand that as a defense mechanism, but it still remains important to point out that how can you hold perpetrators to account if we must always consider, this or that bad thing could have happened to them? And you know that Johns or abusive men in relationships do not do the same courtesy for women. Johns don't spend a lot of time usually thinking, what bad shit could have happened to her, unless they have some kind of fetish for it. If they did, the sex trade wouldn't exist. It continues, this doesn't mean you have to be friends. Take whatever steps you need to protect yourself in the future. But you're so much bigger and better than how they made you feel today. Yeah, just rise above it. Just be the bigger person. You got scared, you got hurt, you got abused? Just be the bigger person. The text continues, while you're doing this, remember exactly who the hell you are. A gorgeous creature of delight, the breath of life. Prostitution takes years of the life of many women, but it's great that men can get delight, that they feel alive. Really great. The author continues, you bring sexual healing and inspiration and excitement to this world. I might do a whole video on this sometime. The sexual healing narrative has led to such programs as some psychiatric clinics in my country, Germany, having women in prostitution either come in or sending men from their clinics, convicted rapists, into brothels to get some of that sexual healing and practice on a live flesh and blood woman who is a sex professional on how to treat women decently. That sexual healing narrative has led to some bad places. It's not led to women in sex trade actually gaining a significant amount of respect in society. The text continues, truly, it's too bad some people can't appreciate all your hard work and accept what you offer graciously. But you know who you are. Nobody can take that from you. It finishes with, our job in life is to heal ourselves. As we do, we heal the world. We achieve this by first tending to our own needs, then turning our attention to others. It's never easy to extend unconditional compassion to those who've harmed us, but as Socrates said, those who are the hardest to love need it the most. Wow. Before I did this reaction podcast, I just skimmed this blog post, and it's actually so much more disturbing than I expected. It's really fucked up. My final point is this whole narrative of you be stronger, you be Buddha, you do yoga, you eat right, you sleep right. This kind of advice and this narrative of it's your responsibility, it is one of the many reasons why women who've left the sex trade are told every day, and I fucking see it on Twitter every day, just because you weren't tough enough to handle sex work does not mean that other women aren't tough enough. And you should not critique the sex trade just because you weren't ready for it, good enough for it, made for it. Other women are. And almost every woman in the sex trade thinks she is that one. She is that Buddha. She is that stoic. She is that super tough, smart. And I'm not saying women aren't tough or smart. They are. But this industry can very well crush you no matter your IQ, your karate belt, whatever. And the narrative that, yeah, you just need to woman up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you will be fine is a lie and a dangerous one, and it lends itself to victim blaming. We, for example, see that there is a very dangerous narrative of toughness, for example, directed at Black women who are told, right, you're the pillar of their community, right? You need to bring up the boys, otherwise they'll get violent. You need to keep your man from going into gang violence, whatever. Like, there's all this pressure on women, like Black women in America, to be tough and to be street smart and to be savvy, or like on poor people in general, on a lot of different people. And we see that it destroys people. It is actually also a narrative that, to a degree, we have towards men. We tell men to be tough. Well, men tell each other, be tough, don't show your feelings, da-da-da-da-da. And this, whatever group this is directed at, it leads them to, well, if they can't pull themselves up by their bootstraps, they think it's like they're the problem. They weren't tough enough. So it leads them to feel bad about themselves, or it leads them to endure traumatic situations like abusive relationships because they think they have to handle them to like keep their toughness label. Only weak people leave when things get hard. Only weak people seek out therapy. This toughness narrative, resiliency narrative is harmful. I'm not even saying that no degree of personal responsibility exists or that there are things that you as an individual can change about your life. It just depends very much on your circumstances. And there's no advice that works for everyone. And there are absolutely things that people cannot pull themselves out by themselves, especially fucking traumatic situations. And like pretending that prostitution is not one of those situations. We can see the harm of the resiliency narrative for other groups. Soldiers. Soldiering is different from prostitution because in prostitution she usually doesn't have a weapon. She's not in gear, she's naked and alone in a room. But, you know, PTSD rates are quite comparable to war zones because you do go out every day not sure if one of the Johns is going to be the last one you ever see. This toughness narrative for soldiers is bad. So why is it good for women in prostitution? Or like Buddha mentality. Just be nice, just be kind, just let it roll off you. The Buddha mentality is a new thing that I haven't heard before. That's part of this particular piece. But to me it's the same thing, just with more like feminine language. Women, you should carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. And heal men. You're great healers. We heal men with our vaginas naturally. Not with like medical knowledge or other ways of helping the world. We do it with our vaginas. To me, that sounds like the patriarchy's talking.